Globally, the disabled community has an annual disposable income of over $13 trillion. In the American market alone, the disposable income of working-age disabled people is estimated to be around $500 billion. Disabled people also influence 53% of global consumer decisions, and 87% of consumers prefer brands that actively include and represent disabled people. As you can see, we can paint an undeniable business case for disability inclusion. The numbers are impressive, and they can get us into rooms. But can they keep us in the room? And maybe the bigger question is, should we have to legitimize our existence within spaces based solely on our economic power and value? Advocates and disabled people, myself included, have been pushing the business case for decades. But maybe it's not working. Are we at risk of commodifying or even simplifying our existence? And at the same time, we must be clear. Disabled people are not charity. Economic inclusion is important, but it's not enough to get the job done. And while the numbers are significant, they are not the whole story. I never excelled in school. Actually, quite the opposite. I was terrible. I failed practically every class. I was diagnosed with dyslexia at a young age, but that didn't explain all of the reasons for my horrible performance. A big part of it was due to bullying. But my amazing mum was determined to find a space for me where I could excel. She put me into dance class, and that very quickly became my second home. In my late teens, I danced my way into a prestigious dance academy in London. Dreams of grand jetés and pirouettes filled every thought. I was determined to be a professional dancer. But one day, I woke up in an excruciating amount of pain. It got worse, and although I saw doctors, I was continuously dismissed, saying that my pain and my symptoms were due to stress and an eating disorder. Before long, I couldn't eat. I became unrecognizable. I was hospitalized for the next 4 years. Eventually, after many, many surgeries, I was able to eat again, and today I live with chronic illness, chronic pain, a permanent ileostomy, and PTSD from the medical trauma that I induced over those 4 years. When I was well enough, I took a trip to Los Angeles. I was really passionate about finding a new pathway into the creative industries that I loved so much, and I wanted a fresh start. But before long, I ended up losing a job due to disability discrimination. And that's when it hit me. I am disabled. I am now living in a world that is no longer built with me in mind. But when I get on the bus and I need a seat, I'm continuously told that I don't look disabled. And when I use the disabled bathroom, I'm constantly accused of taking advantage of the system. These experiences drove me to build my first company, See Talent, a talent agency that represented disabled artists. And I called it See Talent because disabled people rarely have access to option A or option B, and we have to create our own option C. At See Talent, our goal was to change the way the world viewed and defined disability, using the massive power and reach that we have within the entertainment and media industries. At See Talent, we placed hundreds of talent in thousands of roles in projects like HBO's The Last of Us, the Hunger Games prequel, and with many brands including Rihanna's Savage X Fenty, Google, Disney, and countless others. The talent we represented had a combined reach of over 50 million people. And in 2022, See Talent was acquired by a creator marketing company. And that acquisition marked one of the largest investments ever made in disabled talent within the creative industries. Yet, despite our progress, disabled people are still legally allowed to be paid sub-minimum wage across over 30 states in America. We don't have marriage equality. We face forced sterilization. And disabled people are twice more likely to live in poverty and twice more likely to be unemployed compared to non-disabled people. And this is far, far worse for those with intersectional identities. Economic exclusion is just the tip of the iceberg. Success, for me, means a comprehensive change in the perception and employment of disabled people. I want to see disabled role models, because the more disabled leaders that we have, the quicker change will happen. When I first moved to LA, it became glaringly prevalent that many employers and roles prioritize stamina over talent. PA roles, entry-level positions, all of the criteria was you have to lift a certain amount of weight or be able to drive a car. Then the roles slightly above that said must have prior experience. So we're stuck in this perpetual cycle of unemployment. I also noticed that traditional education systems are struggling to keep up with the very quickly, rapidly evolving workforce demands. There are unprecedented labor force shortages, and companies are spending over $1 trillion on turnover costs annually. So, after selling my first company, I founded Making Space, a talent acquisition and learning platform for companies to train, access, and retain pre-qualified disabled talent. At Making Space, we are building new pathways to employment by putting employer-endorsed, accessible education at the forefront of the hiring process. This creates better outcomes for both candidates and employers. Additionally, we're using the power of storytelling. We've partnered with Reese Witherspoon's company, Hello Sunshine, to tell the untold stories of disabled people. We've recently seen great success working with NBC Sports, a partnership working to increase the employment of disabled people, both in front and behind the camera. NBC Sports and Making Space created free and accessible education, developing a pre-trained hiring pipeline from the disabled community, allowing NBC to access this huge, untapped, and often overlooked talent pool. Talent from the pipeline were recently hired for the broadcast of the 2024 Paris Olympics and Paralympics. Talent who were in the hosting roles made the first ever disabled people to be hosting the Paralympics for the NBC coverage, making history. 67% of disabled job seekers reported that skills-based hiring led to better job matches and greater satisfaction within their roles. Disability has consistently been seen as tragedy, as opposed to the natural part of the human experience. And more than half of disabled employees don't disclose their disabilities at work. This leads to high turnover, stagnant career growth, and a significant loss of valuable talent. Many of us fear that our accommodations won't be believed, and we face so much discrimination. The pandemic highlighted these biases when remote work, which was long demanded by disabled people, was only widely implemented when non-disabled people needed it. This not only showcases a deep-seated bias around disability, but also the lack of disabled people in leadership and decision-making positions. Since I became disabled, it was not until recently that I realized my experiences as a chronically ill and disabled person could actually be seen as a competitive advantage. For example, because I manage complex medical supplies, I have transferable skills that support operations coordination. Because I have directed, led complex medical teams, I have transferable skills that support project management. Additionally, I am constantly having to navigate an inaccessible society, leading to adaptability, flexibility, perseverance, creativity, skills that are desperately needed by the workforce. Making Space has developed Making Space AI, a tool embedded within a candidate's profile that turns the lived experience of disability into transferable skills, positioning what has been seen as this weakness into a competitive advantage. Disabled people are also much more likely to be founders, not only because so many of us have the necessary traits that entrepreneurs need because they come naturally to disabled people, but also because traditional employment is so inaccessible for us. Yet, disabled entrepreneurs are 400 times less likely to receive funding than non-disabled entrepreneurs. When I was raising venture capital, I got told constantly by VCs and companies that I should turn my successful business into a charity because people prefer to donate to disability than they do invest in it. We must dismantle the intangible walls of prejudice and bias. We must reform systems like restrictive asset and income limits tied to disability benefits that penalize disabled people from working or earning too much. We must normalize disabled people being experts in subjects beyond just disability. And we must look at the dynamic and nuanced approach that disabled people are taking to advance the rights and the opportunities of disabled people. So to the disabled people in this room, whether you openly identify or not, take up space and know your rights. To the non-disabled people in this room and our allies, support us in keeping our rights. And to the employers, utilize the tools and technology built by disabled people to create a more accessible and inclusive future of work for us all. And whilst we should continuously remind society of the profits that they are missing out on by not including us, we must look at the human rights and civil rights perspective to ensure that we remain a part of the conversation.
Think of sharing what you know.